Dear listeners, welcome to Whimsy Woven Stories, where Reddit's tales come alive in mesmerizing narratives.
Hello, I did not expect this, but at least she had the courage to face me, instead of continuing to mess around until I caught her. I really don't know what to say. Am I angry? Yes. Am I confused? Yes. Will I try to stop her? Never. George, I am not unreasonable. If you feel it is necessary, go consult a lawyer. The only thing I ask is that you continue to pay for the children's college education. Apart from that, I want nothing else, just my clothes, accessories, and jewelry. I just sat there, holding the divorce petition in my hand, and I didn't even open it or look at it. What's the point? Linda had already moved her things out of the house, and I didn't even notice. I didn't say anything, but she insisted on talking nonstop. She does this when she's nervous. She tries to act calm and in control, but the words that keep flowing out of her mouth betray her. I stared at the document, laughing to myself. I think she noticed and started talking faster. When I stood up, I threw the envelope onto the coffee table and said, "Get out." I got the message. Goodbye. At least she stopped talking. She stuttered a bit, and as I walked towards the kitchen to get a bottle of cold beer, she turned and walked out the front door for the last time. 10 minutes later, on my second bottle, I took a look at the package she left behind. Just as she said, simple and clean. She also included a power of attorney so that I could sell the house. We just applied for a second mortgage for our 2 sons, Robert and Glenn's college tuition. If I sell the house now, I wouldn't even make enough profit to cover the real estate agent's commission. So, what brought a 20-year marriage to an abrupt end? Old lover Cameron Wright was her first love. Linda and Cameron were a stable couple, even before I met her. She used to mention him often, and some of our mutual friends have commented on him over the years. I ignored it. So what if he was an old boyfriend? Now I know it was more than that. I must have sat for a long time because I noticed the room getting darker. I knocked over 3 empty bottles, reached for the lamp on the bedside table, and the doorbell rang. Damn, what now? I said to myself, George, I just found out what she did. Billy said I should come over and see if you're okay. It was Linda's sister, Grace, whom I always liked. In fact, I liked her more than Linda. I must have drunk too much. I shouldn't think like that about his wife. I shook my head as if there was water in my ears, trying to sort out my logic and senses. Grace took my arm and led me to the kitchen. I was a bit resistant because she seemed to treat me like a patient. I don't need any damn help. The fluorescent lights hurt my eyes, but I squinted to avoid it. How much beer did I drink? I drank about half a cup of coffee before I realized Grace hadn't said anything. I'm feeling much better now, George. Can we talk now? Give me a minute, I have to urinate. When I came back, she had refilled the cup. So, Grace, tell me about my lovely wife and Cameron Wright. When did all this start? Your foolish brother-in-law just found out this afternoon. Don't be too hard on yourself, George. I always thought you still had feelings for Cameron, even after you got married. If you had said it 20 years ago. Don't be silly, I wouldn't get involved in that. I just hoped that over time, she would forget him. You two seem to get along well, Grace. It was never as good as it seemed. I now realize that most of the time, this relationship was more platonic than romantic. I'd been trying for years, but I never really warmed up to her. Flowers, candy, and jewelry never worked. We got along well. In fact, we rarely argued. I guess I know why now. You covered it well, thank you. Can I have some oatmeal cookies from the jar? My stomach is loudly asking for food. So, sister-in-law, what motivated my wife to abandon me? If you remember, Cameron dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force. After that, you and Linda started dating. Cameron was Linda's first love, if you know what I mean. I nodded and shrugged at the same time. A girl never forgets her first love. Anyway, when he left, she was very angry. She wanted a family and children. I guess you were the one she chose to help her achieve that goal. I thought you made a good choice, voice. I had no idea she was just using you until he came back. Hell, I don't think she even knew he was coming back. So why is he coming back now? He retired from the Air Force after 20 years of service, retiring as a major. Linda claimed he had a nice pension and several good administrative positions lined up in the area, ready to start his second career. She told me this, and it actually sounded proud. She couldn't stop praising this great military career, as if she had always been a part of it. To be honest, George, it sounds a bit disgusting. So I guess she's living with him now. He's renting in the Berkshire Heights until he can find a suitable house to buy locally. Linda has now completely moved in with him. How long has he been back? I'm not sure, but I think about 3 weeks. He called her as soon as he got into town. So this means foolish George has been wearing a green hat for so long. It seems so. I'm sorry, Grace. She tried to pour me coffee again, but I gestured for her to leave. I don't need more coffee now. The only thing I want now is a shower and a good night's sleep. Thank you for dropping by, Grace. Lock the door when you leave. My sister-in-law actually looked sad for me as I walked out of the room. I'm glad the children are not at home, because I would be embarrassed to have to explain to them what happened. They will eventually find out, but I hope by then I have regained my composure, so I won't be so pitiful. My career choice was not so ambitious, but I like my job. I am in charge of the produce section of one of the larger supermarkets in the area. The company has been trying to get me to take on a managerial position for the past 10 years, but I don't want long working hours and major responsibilities. It doesn't matter now. The next morning, I called my regional supervisor and told him I am now ready for promotion. That afternoon, I was assigned to take over a new store, about 10 miles away from home. I received 3 days of training in Baltimore and then started my job. In my spare time, I informed the children about the marital status, put the house on the market, and rearranged all my credit cards and bank accounts. Linda's car is in her name, but the insurance policy is under my policy. Emphasize this word, I got a new store, and it takes me a lot of time to get it running. I don't mind because it keeps me from thinking about my personal issues. The company's affairs are quite smooth, so most of the difficulties I encounter are easy to solve. The company has several professional store openers who stayed with us for the first 2 weeks. It was a big help. They handled most of the training for the new store staff. Half of the people are experienced, transferred from other stores in the area. I feel comfortable with the job and confident in my abilities. Soon, things calmed down, everything was under control, running smoothly. So I had time to start arranging my personal affairs. Since I planned to find a small apartment near the store, I started dealing with everything in the house that I no longer needed. I gave most of it away. Of course, the first thing to deal with was the marriage bed. I got a lot of satisfaction from disposing of the wedding photos and family photos. Billy insisted that I come over to his house for a barbecue next Sunday, assuring me that Linda wouldn't be there. He also wanted to fill me in on the latest on Cameron Wright, the local war hero. It wasn't a big barbecue. Billy and Grace's 2 teenage daughters made an appearance but quickly disappeared. Basically, it was just an opportunity for Billy and me to chat. Grace spent most of the afternoon providing us with cold beers and cleaning up the mess Billy made while cooking. All right, Billy, how much do you know about Miss, or should I say Major Wright? I only know that he's been making the rounds at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall. Cameron and Linda come by a few times a week. He puts on quite a show, shaking hands with the guys there. They seem to like it, but I think they're just impressed with the fresh blood. Hell, most of the guys who go there are over 60. What's Linda doing? She usually just stands by and smiles while he brags. Humph, she never acted like that with us. God, George, you're not a war hero. Billy couldn't help but laugh when he said this, but I didn't find it funny. George, he said, I have a small problem I don't want to deal with, that is, getting people to work the night shift. It's hard to find people willing to work the night shift, and it's almost impossible to find good shift workers. Maria Sanchez hopes I won't complain. She smiled, but she looked a bit nervous.
No, it's not a complaint, Mr. Templeton, but I need some help. Go on, I'll do my best. I have 2 sons, 15 and 16, who both work part-time after school. They have a school bus to catch at 7 in the morning, but sometimes when I get home at 8, they're still in bed. They're not lazy, just tired. I need to get them started in the morning, if you know what I mean. You want a raise so they don't have to work? No, not at all. They work to earn money for college. They're both doing well in school, but I have to help them get there. What do you expect me to do? Help. I find it interesting that she doesn't have a complaining attitude. She's a straightforward woman. She manages a strict team, but she has trouble with her own children. I chuckled softly, and in return, I got a sharp retort. This is not funny, Mr. Templeton. If you can't think of any way to help me, I'll have to find another job. This is interesting, Miss Sanchez. You manage a group of people who work at night, and they would take every opportunity to slack off, but they don't because they work for you, and you won't tolerate that kind of behavior. How can you let two young boys take advantage of you? Where is their father when all this is happening? I really angered her, and she began to rise, her eyes flashing with fire. For a moment, I was worried that I might have lost her. You are an arrogant jerk, Mr. Templeton. Everyone says you are smart and fair, and it seems they were wrong. I am not here to be insulted. Calm down, sit down. I have a possible solution. She sat down again, but she was obviously not happy. I will change your working hours. You will start at 11, which will give you time to prepare your inventory so that the night shift team can arrive at 12. You will work until 6. When the first day shift supervisor arrives, he will take over the end of your shift. You will have enough time to go home and take the children to school, and you may even be able to make breakfast for them. That's great, but there's a small problem. I need at least 38 scheduled hours to keep my health insurance. I can't afford to lose insurance. She was right, but I wasn't finished. Do you go to church, Miss Sanchez? Damn it, here we go again. You really know how to infuriate someone. What does my church attendance have to do with my job? You are indeed very excitable, Miss Sanchez. I hope you can calm down until I finish speaking, and do not call me Miss Sanchez. I am not married. I guess you also have some smart remarks about that. I began to feel annoyed with this lady. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and immediately fell back. For a moment, I was just looking at the ceiling. I was surprised to find how cheap the chandelier looked. I heard her giggle as she looked over from my desk. I lay on my back like a little frog, and she chuckled softly. I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed by my clumsy behavior, and she found it amusing. It was hard to remain composed while settling back in. If I can't call you Miss Sanchez, then what should I call you? Maria? Just Maria? Maria, I have 2 supervisors who are Southern Baptists, and neither of them will work on Sunday mornings, so I ended up having to work. I want you to work on Sundays, from 6 a.m. to noon. This will provide you with additional hours, but that's not the most important thing. It's important to me. You pay an extra fee for family health insurance, right? Yes, $80 a month, and my 2 boys are also covered. Maria, I plan to make you a salaried employee, which means your boys will automatically be covered by your insurance, and it also means you will get a small raise, which also means you will not be eligible for overtime pay. Is that correct? Yes. She was silent for a moment. She was a striking woman. Her hair was dark but not black, her eyes as black as coal. There didn't seem to be an ounce of fat on her. In fact, she looked a bit haggard. I was trying to figure out what kind of figure she was hiding under her work clothes when she replied, Okay, I accept, but I don't know anything about being a day shift supervisor. I've never had to work with customers. Don't worry, I will work with you for the first 4 shifts. You can't mess it up. This was the beginning of my relationship with Maria Sanchez. It was, to say the least, very stressful. At that time, I never expected it to become serious. I expected her to only work 6 hours on Sunday mornings, but we ended up working very late. She insisted on knowing everything she would be responsible for. I had nothing better to do, and I enjoyed her company. There was a small article in the Sunday newspaper about a fundraising event for the local American Legion, with Mid Cameron Wright in full uniform, photographed with my lovely wife. I can sincerely say that I have never seen her look as proud as she did in that photo. You might think she won those damn medals herself. It wasn't until Monday night that I spoke with Billy. Grace called my workplace and insisted that I come over for spaghetti. How could I refuse? Billy had a copy of Cameron's VFW application and his discharge papers. I told him about the photo in the Sunday newspaper, and he promised to get the form from the veterans of foreign wars. Grace also overheard at the beauty salon that Cameron had applied for membership at the Liberty Key Country Club. Linda and I had tried to join, but we were rejected. I didn't care, but Linda was devastated. Grace said it looked like Cameron's application was almost pre-approved. It was a quiet week. I had found a small apartment, and I usually went there directly after work to drink at least 3 bottles of beer, sometimes more. The rent included basic cable TV, so I wasn't entirely bored. I would install DSL internet connection next week. The week ended on a high note when I found an invitation on my desk, inviting me to have dinner with Maria and her 2 sons. I already had her address and phone number, but she still gave them to me. It felt a bit awkward and could easily be seen as a violation of the company's internal dating policy. Just in case, I called my boss in Baltimore and explained the situation. After getting his approval, I felt much better about the whole situation. I brought a bottle of wine, but I didn't know what to bring for the kids. I was a bit nervous about meeting Maria's sons, but the atmosphere improved when they found out I already had 2 sons in college. According to Maria, she found herself excluded from most of the conversation. I tried to include her a few times, but she ended up giving me a little grimace, as if to say she didn't have to worry. She seemed pleased that I was getting along well with Alman and Martin. The evening ended too quickly, and we didn't even open the bottle of wine. That Sunday, I spent about 2 hours with Maria as she began her first real shift as a supervisor. I felt she was eager for me to leave so she could take charge on her own. As for me, it was a good sign that she promised to call me if there were any problems. She also invited me over for dinner that night. After dinner, Alman and Martin mysteriously disappeared, leaving Maria and me alone. I helped her clear the dinner dishes, and we finally opened the bottle of wine.
At first, the conversation was a bit awkward. Apart from the dinner on Friday, all previous interactions between Maria and me were strictly professional. She looked a bit down when I explained that our relationship could cause problems, but she quickly mentioned that she believed it was a minor issue that I would easily resolve. Although I didn't bring it up, Maria must have felt the need to explain her marital status. She lived with the boy's father in Tucson, and then one day he just disappeared. She stayed there for 3 years, but he never came back. Her brother, a bricklayer in the Philadelphia area, convinced her to move in with him and his family. Eventually, she found her own place and had been working to improve the boys' lives. She had never been married. I had just finished recounting my marital tragedy when the wine bottle ran dry. Despite the dismal topic of conversation, I still enjoyed spending time with Maria. We prolonged the evening by a few hours, so the wine consumption was not an issue. When it was time for me to drive home, everything was normal. A few days later, both at work and in my personal life, things were status quo. Billy came to see me one night, bringing news from the American Legion. We finished several bottles of beer, trying to figure out what to do next now that we had all the background information in hand. A few bottles of beer turned into too many, and Grace eventually came to pick up her drunken husband. I was late for work the next day, but no one complained because I was the boss and usually arrived early. On Friday morning, 3 other vice presidents of the company unexpectedly showed up. They made a superficial tour of the store, but everything seemed a bit fake. When we took a break for lunch, everything became clear. Apparently, there was a severe shortage of supermarket managers, at least for me. Before the meal ended, I was offered a regional supervisor position, managing 6 stores within a 30-mile radius. The salary and benefits that came with this position exceeded anything I could have imagined. Of course, I accepted. The second in command at my current store was also very surprised when I handed over the entire business to him. I only asked him for one thing, not to interfere with Maria. He winked at me and smiled, indicating that we were all on the same page. Naturally, Maria was not happy to see me leave the store, but she was pleased that I had been promoted. I took her out for a delicious dinner, which I suppose you could say was our first real date. The children were happy to give us a chance to go out together for the evening. It was also the first time I saw her dressed up beautifully. She was truly a beauty. When she heard that I would still be working and living nearby, she seemed to accept my promotion a bit more easily. On the other hand, she was not pleased to hear that I had to go to Baltimore for 2 weeks of training. I spent Sunday lunch with Billy and Grace, celebrating my good fortune, and I tried my best not to drink. I planned to drive to Maryland that night so that I could stay sober for my first day of training. Billy wanted to know how I planned to deal with Cameron and Linda. I told him it would have to wait until I finished and settled into my new position. Maria and I spoke on the phone every day, sometimes even twice. It felt like being a teenager. She asked me about all the details of the training, and I let her tell me what was happening on her end. I always inquired about her children, and she seemed to appreciate my interest in them. My new job came with many responsibilities I had not anticipated. Community involvement was important, and I was expected to join as many civic and social organizations as possible, including the local country club. I laughed when I was told that my company status would ensure that I would be accepted almost anywhere I applied. Life was good. I returned home for the first weekend and saw Maria twice. I got my first kiss, but I felt a bit uncomfortable because technically I was still married. She questioned my uncertainty about the kiss and chuckled softly at my explanation. She teased me a bit, and I think she enjoyed it. I knew I did. The company provided a small office in one of the local commercial complexes, complete with a secretary. They had done this before, and it was obvious. I was ready to start operations in full on the first day, and on my desk were other things, as well as my application for full membership at the Liberty Key Country Club. All I had to do was sign it, and then I could collect my membership card. I decided this would be the first task of my new job. I was dressed in a new suit, driving the company's new car, and everything was fine until I walked into the club lobby and saw Linda. She was standing with a few other ladies, dressed in a cute tennis outfit. I didn't even know she played tennis. Suddenly, the hurt and humiliation she had caused me came rushing back. I lost my confidence and self-assurance just by seeing her. I didn't show it outwardly, trying to walk past the group. It was going well until I heard one of the ladies say, "Isn't that your husband walking in?" I didn't turn around. There was a slight grumble, and when I handed in my application, the receptionist disappeared into a back room. I stood there waiting for something unpleasant to happen. I knew it was coming. If only I had a clever quip ready, but my mind was blank. "George, what are you doing here? This is for members only. You know you won't try to join again, right?" I really wanted to embarrass her in front of her new friends, but I couldn't do it. "Hello, Linda. You look good. Is that outfit new? I didn't know you played tennis." I was babbling. I wanted to be clever and witty, but I just couldn't do it. A series of foolish statements clearly showed how nervous I was. It was embarrassing in itself. "I'm taking tennis lessons, George. I've always wanted to play tennis, but we could never afford it." All I could do was smile. "You really shouldn't be here, George. It makes me very uncomfortable. It's still for members only." I still had a smile on my face when the receptionist returned to the counter. "Here is your membership card, locker key, and a copy of the club's rules and regulations. Welcome to the Liberty Key Country Club, sir." I nodded at him and then turned to leave. Linda stood there with a puzzled look on her face. I grinned, said nothing more, and walked back to the club lobby. I kept smiling all the way. That night, I took Maria to the Red Lobster for dinner. I didn't mean to show off, but telling Maria about my earlier meeting with Linda made me feel very pleasant. There was no wine at dinner because my guest had to be at work at 11 o'clock. We had some light laughter about the situation. Maria promised to go to the club with me for a late lunch after work on Sunday. I found myself hoping that we would run into Cameron and Linda. The following week went smoothly until Friday. Helen, my new secretary, now knew about my marital issues, and she grinned when I walked into the office. There was the local newspaper on my desk, and the front page was a photo of Cameron Wright in handcuffs being put into a black unmarked car. Cameron didn't realize that the American Legion would check their applicants to make sure no unworthy veterans slipped in. He did retire from the Air Force, but as a technical sergeant, not a major. The fact that he wore medals that were never awarded to him would cause him more trouble. They call it stolen valor, and it's not taken lightly. I had a strange feeling that Cameron Wright would soon lose face rapidly in his hometown. Helen brought me a cup of coffee and told me I could smile, which made her smile. About an hour later, I received a call from the real estate agent, informing me that the house had been sold and was scheduled to close in 2 weeks. Just when I thought things couldn't get better, my final divorce papers arrived in the mail. Good old Cameron had used some new friends' connections to get the papers processed faster than usual. I don't think they're friends anymore. The day and the week ended well. Billy came to visit my new office, but what he really wanted to do was tell me that Linda had moved in with him and Grace. He hadn't been home yet, so his only information was what Grace had told him over the phone. He wasn't thrilled about his new roommate, but he was very happy about what had happened to Billy. Billy didn't object to going with me to the local corner bar to celebrate, as long as I was buying. I called home to tell Maria the good news, all of it. I think she was as happy as I was. Billy came to pick me up on Saturday morning. He could drink more than me. We went to Shoney's for a breakfast buffet and some much-needed coffee. As we ate, I got an update on my ex-wife's situation. Her car had been repossessed. It seemed that Cameron had been willing to pay for Linda, but the checks were no good. She didn't even know until they came to repossess the car. Apparently, he had handled everything else the same way. I don't know how long he expected to get away with it, but he did deceive a lot of people before he was caught. Grace told Linda she could stay for a week, and only a week. Linda didn't know where she was going or what she was going to do. The little money she had when she left the marriage seemed to have disappeared as well. Of course, by this time Maria was already fast asleep in bed, but Ullman and Martin were ready and willing to give the Liberty Key golf course a try. When we returned home, Maria got up and gave us a good lesson on having fun without her. We ordered pizza and watched a pay-per-view movie. Yes, life is beautiful. Maria and I spent a delightful brunch at the country club on Sunday morning. I had hoped to show her off in front of Linda and Cameron, but they never showed up. There were some glances around us, and I noticed people talking, but overall, the situation was good. This was the first of many future brunches. Linda moved out of Billy and Grace's home and into a small furnished apartment before the weekend was over. Grace and Linda remained in touch, but they were not as close as before. Although they are sisters, Robert and Glenn came home for our wedding. They teased me because I had to go out and find 2 new people to replace them. The 4 boys got along well, which pleased both Maria and me. Robert and Glenn never mentioned Linda. I didn't deliberately avoid talking about her, but the topic never seemed to come up. I don't know if they went to see her before they went back to school. Billy was my best man, but he was more of a witness because it was just a civil ceremony. Maria stopped working before the wedding. I insisted that Ullman and Martin also quit their jobs so they could focus on their studies. Either of them complained. Although I didn't make money when I sold the old house, I was still able to buy a new house without any trouble. 2 months after the wedding, Maria and I saw Linda while shopping at Target. She was working at the customer service counter at the front of the store, dressed in the Target uniform of khaki pants and a red shirt. She looked as if she had lost weight. She looked up and noticed Maria and me looking in her direction. We watched her turn around and go into the office behind the counter. We didn't want to embarrass her. She had been through enough. Maria and I left the store and went shopping elsewhere. Since then, Cameron Wright has disappeared. After his arrest and prosecution, he was taken away, and we have not heard anything about him since. Robert and Glenn came home for Christmas in the new house. The big surprise of the holiday was Linda's arrival. Maria had invited her without telling me. At first, it was an awkward situation. I felt annoyed, but then I realized it was a very elegant and bold move by Maria. Confrontation was necessary for all of us to move on. I never forgave Linda for what she did, but it felt better knowing that she realized what she had lost.
Thank you for listening. Please share your opinion about this story in comment section. Also make sure to like and subscribe to the channel.